The core writing skills workshop here. And one of the things that we talk about in our workshops is if you are a participant in any of the other workshops that we have, such as note-taking, lecture notes, what else? Analytical reading and some of these other things. What we try to do is put a lot of the things that we talk about in other workshops and tie them together to some of the things that we're doing now. It's going to be no different today when we go ahead and talk about core writing skills, because one of the things that's important with core writing skills is to obviously listen to the question that's being asked and find ways to leverage what's being asked with information that you get from what you're reading, as well as some of the things you're hearing in lecture notes. So, excuse me, some of the things you're hearing in lecture. So we're going to go ahead and talk about all those things and how they come together so that you can actually go ahead and come up with a good set of core writing skills that I think can can be of value to you now as well as into the future. The first group that we presented this to, we talked a little bit about how folks have been successful at writing. You know, many of you, all of you, in fact, had to write an essay in order to get this scholarship. And all things being equal, if you're able to fill out paperwork, then the thing that distinguished you from one other candidate to another is the quality of your essay. And that remains true for all the rest of the things that you're going to be doing having to do with writing for the rest of your life. So understand that you've already been in the process of doing that kind of work, and we're going to talk about things here methodically, pull out some examples, and to see if there's not a way for us to improve some of the things that have to do with our writing. Okay? So, before we get started, just silence your cell phones. I'm going to make sure that you turn your cell phones up before you leave. And I'm going to ask, I guess, a couple of questions. How would you rate, excuse me, your writing right now? Luz, how do you think your writing is right now?
Not that bad.
Okay, it's not that bad. What gives you the sense that it's not that bad? Okay, good. All right, so you're getting good feedback in terms of the grades you're getting, right? You're getting A's. Okay, cool. Jorge, what do you think?
Decent as well.
Decent? Okay, cool. Any other thoughts out there about some of the things that you're getting in terms of feedback, rating of your writing right now? Okay, all right, that's fine. You know, it can be up or down. You know, I used to think I was a pretty good writer coming out of high school, and I guess I truly wasn't. I ended up having to take a remedial class after my first writing class at UC San Diego. I essentially had an F my first paper, a D for my second paper, and a C for my third paper at Muir Writing at UC San Diego. So essentially my average after 3 papers was a D, which meant I had to go ahead and take a remedial writing course that was taught by a community college instructor from Miracosta College. And I can tell you this, that was actually a good opportunity for me to actually learn how to be a better writer, because what was asked of me in high school versus what was asked for me in college was very different. The feedback I had gotten was that, you know, I was pretty good at summarizing stuff, but not necessarily doing analysis. And those are some of the things I think were important for me to learn, because number one, I guess I wasn't as awesome as I thought I was. But another thing that also helped me become a better writer, because I had at one point this notion that I was going to major in Spanish literature. So I actually got to write a number of papers in Spanish, but when it really got really hard, well, obviously I changed that major. I went back to biology. But the fact is, by learning how to write to a different audience, to be very cognizant of gender, number of the audience, paying attention to voice and style, that helped me by writing in a non-English language to actually become a better writer in English as well. Okay, so kind of think a little bit about that. The reason I put this comic up here is the tension in terms of writing has a lot to do with what your writing skills are. And what we know about a skill is that it gets better the more you use it, right? How many of you can say that you're a better driver now than when you were the first time you started driving, right? Yeah, I can definitely say that too. Within the first week, I almost got laid out by a trash truck in San Diego. It was going pretty fast, you know, but I was like, I learned that lesson, right? Then the other piece too is your skill, but also the content. What is it that you're putting in? And understand that, as these things, as you get more demands for better skill, you have to have more critical content in terms of analysis. You can imagine these weight plates getting bigger if you hold on to this analogy. And the fact is, you put more weights, you have to become a stronger weightlifter, I guess, in the sense of being able to carry and improve your skills and your content. Does that make sense? It's kind of that tension. One of the things, too, we need to think about is also attitude toward writing. How many of you were here for the analytical reading workshop we did a couple weeks ago? Analytical reading? Some of you were here? Remember we talked a little bit about, either if you were here last year or several weeks ago, we talked a little bit about, do you like to read what you're reading? Do you set yourself up for being completely bored or not entertained, and kind of put yourself in a bad attitude in terms of what you're trying to read? Many times some of the things that we have in terms of attitude actually get in the way of our writing. I asked one of the folks in the earlier workshop today, she talked about, I put my writing off till maybe the last day, maybe 2 days before. And part of that is she said she was a procrastinator. Okay? And I said, well, a lot of us, when we procrastinate, how many of you would say you're a procrastinator? Okay, right? And we've done okay, right? We've made it this far. So in essence, we put it off. We keep telling ourselves we're not going to put it off. We're going to do things earlier, do things better, do something different. But you know what? If you get a good grade, then you're like, hey, maybe this procrastination thing is not so bad because I'm getting rewarded with good grades. See what I'm saying? So you get reinforced psychologically. That's a little bit what was going on with this woman that was here a little bit earlier today. I asked her, what about writing and procrastination? She said, maybe I just don't manage my time well. Well, you're going to look back and kind of see, like, you might have had a writing assignment that was like 4 weeks in the making. You had 4 weeks to get it in, maybe even 5 weeks. I said, maybe it's not so much how you manage time, it's maybe about your attitude. The attitude that she had was that she was perfectionistic. One of the things we talked about in time management, okay, is that a lot of times folks in goal setting and things like that too, a lot of people are very perfectionistic, and perfectionistic people tend to be procrastinators because they want to make sure that the final product is the best. And it seems sort of counterintuitive, but that is essentially what it is. A lot of folks will wait till the very end because all of a sudden now there's a deadline. So maybe it's not so much that you don't manage time well. Maybe it's just this attitude to a certain degree that if you're perfectionistic, be okay with the fact that you're not perfect. Be okay with the fact that you're not perfect, and maybe that will help you change some of your behaviors around writing. Does that make sense to folks? Okay? So again, it's not only the content, it's not only the skill, but to a certain degree, it's a lot of stuff having to do with attitude, or some of the ways in which you move in the world academically. So, you might be wondering then, what are some of the things that people say, or I might have heard myself saying, that has a lot to do with maybe my attitude in writing? This first column here, and it's included in your smaller handout, the smaller, thinner one, okay? If you hear yourself saying some of these kinds of these statements that are sort of, they're anxiety-producing statements, okay? Someone will say something here. You may have heard yourself say this. Number 5, I strive for perfection in writing, okay? This is kind of a self-defeating attitude, because when you strive for that, you're never going to reach that, to be quite honest. We know of people that make a lot of money being writers. Is that correct? Yeah. People who write tons of books, anyone who's written all of these books about vampires recently and all this other stuff, you know that these folks are prolific writers. They're making a lot of money. They're millionaires, right? But at the same time, they always have folks looking at their work. They send it out to an editor. They send it out to their friends who are other writers. They send it to their relatives, and they get feedback. Okay, so there's never the sense that everything is going to be perfect, even in terms of writing. Even for people that do writing professionally, their work will never be perfect. So if you accept that, for folks that make a living at writing, maybe you ought to make the kind of the same concession for yourself too. Were you going to say something?
My issue with writing
Uh-huh.
is that I need to learn how to change my voice, because I write a lot the way I live and the way I talk.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm writing for my professors, I need to work on changing my voice and my tone and like that. You know?
Yeah.
I write pretty good, but
Uh-huh.
it's like how I talk. You know?
Right, right. I understand that. And that's the trick. That's the difference between written English and spoken English. Okay? We've got a couple of small exercises to kind of get a sense at, you know, how is it that when we write academically, or we are just in a place of writing stuff, that it has to be different than the way we speak. Some of that has to do with skill, some of that has to do with content, some of that has to do with understanding voice and style, knowing your audience, stuff that we've all heard since we were kids about knowing your audience, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. My intent with some of this workshop, by the way, is not to make sure that you're going to walk out of here ready to write a book and you're going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for literature. That's not my intent, okay? Because again, the example is that people who make a living at writing still have folks look at their work, okay? If anything, we're going to get at maybe looking at some of these things that are attitudes and some of the ways in which we can look at how we speak versus how we write when it comes to certain kinds of papers, and we have that as sort of exercises, okay? So sometimes here you might hear yourself saying this too, which is kind of self-defeating. I can't think of how to begin. Sometimes what you probably need to do is just say something like this. I don't have to start at the beginning. I'll start somewhere else and write the introduction later, okay? As a way to unstuck yourself. I know that for myself, sometimes I'll write an introduction. After I'm done with my essay, I end up looking at that introduction. I say, that would be a great concluding paragraph. And I have the ability to go ahead and move stuff around, okay? So kind of break out of your psychic prison, I guess you might say. Feel free to move around. But if you hear yourself saying some of these kinds of things, maybe you need to think a little bit about the attitude here that you can change, okay? So the goals for this workshop. Basic composition, we're going to talk about. It involves brainstorming of ideas. Understanding the assignment. Can't stress to you enough what that means. And in fact, to a certain degree, you understand that because, like I said, you wrote an essay for this scholarship. So you actually did understand the assignment, okay? Development of a thesis. Development of relevant examples, and development of effective conclusions. We're going to emphasize basic essay structure. We really are. And we're going to also talk about organization in order to more clearly communicate ideas and to make writing more effective. Okay? Now, we're not doing tutoring. That's not what we're doing. I'm going to go through a number of different things, but hopefully through the course of this, you'll get an opportunity to see what might be helpful for you and how you can seek more assistance in your writing on your campus. Okay? So tell me, where do you find examples of good writing every day? Okay? Examples of everyday writers, good examples. Who do you think those would be? Yeah. Where do you find good examples of everyday writers? Teachers, professors, correct. Who cruises by your house and throws a newspaper in front of your house at 4:30 in the morning, right? The people that have typed those stories, those are good everyday writers, okay? You know, in the news, they always say, like, all the news that you see on TV starts with print, okay? Someone still has to write those stories, okay? TV shows, a TV show that you watch that's scripted, that has to be written, okay? A number of different things are out there that you see every day